Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to Gate of Trust. And we are in the middle of chapter 2 on page 47 of our books. We're using the Kahos edition in partnership with Chayenu. Maybe it's the Chayenu edition in partnership with Kahos. This is one of the great enigmas of the universe, ladies and gentlemen, which will probably never be solved. But that being said, we will trust. And we are on page 47 of our books. And we learned last week, before we reconvened, before we took a break, we learned that there are 7 vital characteristics that one needs to comply with in order to be truly trustworthy. In order to place your trust in someone, they need to be able to check 7 boxes completely in order to have absolute and complete trust. And the idea is that no human can really fulfill all these 7 things absolutely. In fact, nothing other than God can fulfill these 7 characteristics absolutely. And we will go through all 7 characteristics of what a person would need to have in order to be completely trustworthy. And as we discussed over here, there's a spectrum. There are some people that are more trustworthy, and there's some people that are less trustworthy based on their capacity to check these boxes. When I say trustworthy, not necessarily is it because of a character flaw. As we'll see in the third one. Now let's get there. So the first one we said was love and care. You can only truly trust someone who loves and cares for you. If they don't really care, if they don't care about you, why would you trust them? So they have to love and care for you. The second one we said is they have to be attentive. You can't truly trust someone who ignores you. They might love you, but if they don't have time for you, how are you going to trust them? So a person needs to be loving and attentive in order to be worthy of trust. In order for, and it's not about just being worthy of trust. Worthy is the wrong word. In order for you to feel safe in that person's hands, in that person's dealings with you, in order to feel truly safe and that you can put your trust in them, you have to know that they're loving and attentive. And the third thing we said was they have to be capable, powerful and capable. If the person doesn't have the capability to help you, how can you put your trust in them? So it's not necessarily a character flaw, because sometimes, a person wants to help, but they just can't. But how can you trust the person to resolve a problem for you if they don't have the capacity to do it? Now, obviously, there are people of a variety. It's a spectrum. There's some people that are more capable. There's some people that are less capable. There's some people that are capable for some things and incapable for other things. And so you might trust them with regards to this, but not for that. And this we discussed at great length the other day. And the concept being that dependent on the love, the attentiveness, and the capabilities, those are major influences on your capacity to put your trust in that person. Any questions or comments before we go to the fourth characteristic?
I read through this on Tisha B'Av, and one of the things that I added to every paragraph was 24/7. And it changes how you read every single one of these characteristics.
In other words, there's some people that love you 24/7, but they're not necessarily attentive to you 24/7, and they're not necessarily competent or capable 24/7. Absolutely. And there's some people, and so you may trust them when they're attentive. You may trust them when they're attentive, but when they're not attentive, you can't. How could you put your trust in them when they're not attentive to you? So time is a factor. Space is going to be a factor because of distance, right? If you're far away, how can they help you? There's multiple factors. And what we're going to see, obviously, by the time we get to God, is that it's a whole different picture. So it is interesting. I don't want to go so far yet and say only God can be trusted. Because the truth is, I trust all of you. I trust all of you as far as you are capable. I trust all of you, not because of any character flaw, but I can't trust all of you to heal the sick. Unfortunately, you don't have that capacity. But I can trust, and I'm looking at you all in the Zoom, I can trust all of you to give me good advice. I trust all of you to give me good advice. I trust all of you to help me if I'm in need of help at any particular moment, to do what you can.
We all care about you and your family.
You care about me, and I know that, and I really appreciate that. I know you care about my family, and I care about all of you and your families, of course. And so we trust each other as much as we can, but we also know, you know that I'm not God, and I know that you're not God.
We have limitations.
We have limitations. It's part of who we are. So it's not to say we can't trust other people. We can trust other people. We should trust other people. We must trust other people. But we also have to understand the limitations of people. But what we will see when we come to talk about God is that trust in God is an entirely different story, because human limitations won't apply. So what I'm trying to emphasize, I don't believe that we should read this as a text in how you can't trust people. We must trust people. We must also understand humans are not God. But when it comes to trusting in God, it's a whole different kettle of fish. In fact, that's definitely the wrong metaphor. Kettle of fish. Anyway, let's keep reading, ladies and gentlemen. The fourth aspect of trust. Because I do think personally, I'll tell you why I'm saying this. As I read this, I'm thinking to myself as I'm reading this, what can I learn from this about being a more trustworthy and reliable person? In other words, it's not only for me a reading in how to trust in God, but of course there's got to be an ethical and personal lesson. So as I'm reading this, I'm wondering, how do I become a better person from this? Especially as I'm reading now about characteristics of a trustworthy human being. So I'm learning I need to love. I need to be attentive. I need to show attentiveness. I need to show people I love them and care about them. I need them to know that I'm attentive of their needs. I need to understand that when I'm competent, this is very important for me also in a different way. I need to know when I can help, I can help, but when I can't, so I can't. And sometimes that needs to be communicated. I love you and I care about you and I'm attentive to you and I can help you here. Or sometimes, you know what, I can't help you here. It's not a moral failing. So in a human relationship, this information becomes very, and also those people that haven't helped me, I have to also understand that usually it's because they couldn't. So very often, so this is very, in other words, there's a lot over here that we can learn from in terms of our relationships and ourselves as we read this. There's a lot of insight, there's a lot of wisdom over here about relationships and trust in human relationships before we come to obviously talk about relating to God. The fourth, the bottom of page 47, reverse. But let's read first in English. 4. However, even if the person cares, is diligent, and shows the ability to overcome any obstacle, he may not always know what is in a person's best interest. It is therefore necessary that, in addition to possessing the above 3 qualities, he also knows what is in his best interest. This is massive. Let's read it inside. The fourth factor, the one who is being trusted knows which things will be of true benefit to the one who is trusting in him, and that which is good for the trusting one will not be hidden from him, both in situations where the benefit is apparent and in situations where the benefit is hidden. And let's read the commentary on apparent and hidden. Bottom of the page, apparent and hidden. That is, a person who not only knows what is visibly good, but can also know the consequence of his decisions. For example, a king might consider promoting a confidant to the rank of commander in the army, but such a move might enhance the chance that the latter will be taken prisoner by the enemy. For true trust, the person must have faith in the one he is trusting, and the latter is fully aware of the consequences of all decisions made on his behalf. You have to be able to think 52 steps ahead. Right? The unknown consequences. Sometimes you think you're doing someone a favor and you'll end up hurting them. Sometimes the people that we thought were not helping us are the ones that helped us the most. Short-term gain isn't always the best. Long-term, who knows what's best? So in order to be truly trustworthy, the person giving the advice or offering the assistance has to know the future, how the future consequences will be. Now, the obvious lesson from this is, well, who can then really be helpful? Because only God knows the future, which we're going to get to in a certain place. But in our own personal ethical lives, the words of the Mishnah in Avos, in Pirkei Avos and Ethics of Our Father are coming to mind, which is Ezer Chacham, who's wise. Haroya Sanolet, the one who sees what will be born from one's actions. In other words, the one who can foresee consequences. The one who can foresee the consequences. So there is a human capacity to think several steps ahead. So in order to be able to put your trust in someone, you need to know that they're not only thinking short term, they can see the long-term picture.
Like a chess game.
Like a chess game, yeah. But not in a cold and calculated
No, I didn't mean it that way, of
but
course.
in just the capacity to see unforeseen consequences.
Yes.
For if the friend does not know all this, if the person doesn't know the big picture, they can't see the consequences, then the person trusting in him will lack the peace of mind to rely upon him. Only when these four qualities come together in the friend who's being trusted, knowledge of what will benefit his needs, ability to help him, active attentiveness, and compassion, here is going in reverse order, will trust in the friend be strengthened without any doubts. Now the fifth aspect. So the fourth one we said is the capacity to think long-term and see unforeseen consequences. Now comes number 5. The author now continues by saying that in addition to all of the above qualities, the person must, under the exclusive care of the one he trusts in, for all his needs, the person must be under the exclusive care of the one he trusts in for all his needs. Since that person has always taken care of him, he will trust that person to continue to do so. Let's read it inside. The fifth factor. The person being trusted is the only one who has taken care of him from the beginning of the latter's existence through his development, the 9 months when he was in his mother's womb, and the days of his infancy, childhood, youth, adulthood, old age, and until the end of his days. When all of this is clear to the person who has secured the trust, it will surely lead to him resting his mind upon his friend and relying on him to be a support. Due to the good that the friend has done to him in the past, and as a result of the benefits that the person receives from him every moment. All this surely leads to a strengthened trust in his friend. So this is the extreme explanation. Again, we're going to go further. History is important in trust. What he's saying over here essentially is the person has to have proven themselves to be trustworthy in the past. You can't trust someone. You can't really rely on someone who's never been there for you in the past. You can be hopeful, but only when this person has proven themselves time and time again can you truly rely on them. Now, what's the ultimate? Remember, we're looking for the ultimate in trustworthiness. The ultimate in trustworthiness is somebody who's been there for you your entire life. Somebody who's been there for you your entire life and has always been loving, attentive, capable, and wise in the capacity to see the future, and has always been there in that way for you your entire life. You can trust now to move going forward. Because why would they suddenly abandon you? But someone who you've never ever had who's never ever demonstrated their trust for you, the fact, not their trust for you, their capacity to help you, why would you trust them? They're new. However, history is a very important part of trust. The longer the person has been there for you, the more you trust them. If they've been there for you your entire life, then you can have ultimate trust. So again, there's a spectrum. Somebody you know for a year who's been unbelievable for you for a year will gain a certain amount of trust. Somebody who's been there for you for 10 years will gain a tremendous more amount of trust. Somebody who's been there for you for 30 years or 50 years or 100 years will gain more trust. Someone who was with you from the time you were born, from the right in the mother's womb, is going to get the most trust if they've been able to always be there for you and help you and do for you. In other words, time is a massive factor. History is a major factor in trust. So today we introduced two things so far, right? Number one, the capacity to see the future. And number two, to have been there for you in the past. Which interesting about the two we just introduced is they're both time-oriented. The third one was capability. And obviously the inference we learned from that one is only God is a kol yachol, only God can do anything. That's an important expression for those who speak Hebrew, is kol yachol, kol yachol. It's an expression about God. Have you ever heard that expression? God is a kol yachol. Kol yachol means he can do anything. Yachol means capable or able to. Kol is everything. Kol yachol means somebody can do everything. Since only God is a kol yachol, only God is completely able to do anything, so only God can be completely trusted. And since only God can tell the future, from a time perspective of seeing the future, we can only really rely on God. And since only God has always been there for you, you can only really trust in God. But that's going to come in the lessons. But I'm just saying that 4 and 5 are both time-oriented. From a philosophical perspective, it's worth remembering that the 3 fundamental elements that make up life on this earth are Olam, Shana, and Nefesh, which are space. Olam means world, which is space. Shana is time. Time ultimately is past, present, and future. And Nefesh is energy or soul. And since God transcends all three of these characteristics, we're dealing with a whole different story with God, obviously, essentially different, which we're going to come to. I'm just throwing in some philosophy while we're in the middle. Any questions or comments? The sixth characteristic, page 49. But this is not enough. Because even if a person has been cared for exclusively by another until now, someone else may possibly interfere and cause him harm. Only when the other person is the sole individual with the ability to do good or bad to him, that he can be fully trusted.
What's the or bad?
Let's read it inside, but this is very clever. The sixth factor. The person who has trust is completely in the hands of the one he trusts. No one else is able to harm him. Let me read it again. Excuse me. The sixth factor. The person who has trust is completely in the hands of the one he trusts. No one else is able to harm him, help him, do good to him, or protect him from harm, just like a servant who is tied up and imprisoned, who is completely under the jurisdiction of his master, with no one else able to do anything to him, neither good nor bad. When the person who has trust is completely under the jurisdiction of the one he is trusting in the manner outlined above, it will be even more appropriate for him to place his trust in his friend. Saying a very interesting thing, saying like this. There can't be any extenuating circumstances or other forces in which to put your hope or your trust, or to worry about. In other words, someone can love you and they can be attentive to you and they can be capable and they can be able to see the future and they can be there for you your whole life. But if you have to worry about an outside threat more powerful than the one you trust in, then you can't really trust in this being.
Can you elaborate, please?
Yeah. If there's an outside influence, in other words, let's say, it's one of the lessons we learn in life, but there's so many different ways. You have to worry about an outside force coming along and causing harm that the one in whom you trust cannot deal with. Then how good is your trust? More than that. If you hope for an outside force to come and help you, you also won't fully trust in this one in whose hands you are in. So both for the good and for the bad, you have to be fully dependent on this person. Because if you're not fully dependent, then you're never really trusting. Now, I'll tell you something interesting. As I'm reading these words over here, the verse of the psalm that we read every Shabbos is coming to my mind. Every Shabbos we read in the psalm, towards the beginning of davening, we say, "Ka'enei shivcha al yad gevirta ka'eneineinu el Hashem." Like the eyes of a maidservant to her master, so are our eyes towards God. Like the eyes of a maidservant to her master, so our eyes towards God. And the theme over there is just as a servant is fully dependent on the master, so we are totally dependent on God. Now, the interesting thing about this is there's a basic human need and drive for independence. So children begin absolutely dependent on their parents, especially on their mothers. And by the age of 2, the children start saying no, which is part of the basic developmental stage of the beginning of independent identity. And then by the time they hit the age of 14, or 16 or something, they don't have mothers anymore because they're so independent, right? When they hit independence, it's as if they birthed themselves. Who are you? Where did you come from? So there's a basic human need. It's an essential thing, this feeling of independence that develops as part of from childhood into adolescence into adulthood. But the truth is, if you're not completely dependent, then you never completely trust in the other. So trust is a double-edged sword. What we try to do is trust in ourselves. But life has a way of making sure that we learn the lesson that we never really become independent, and how much we need and are so dependent. So all this makes an emotional human being always means we always have complicated lives. But what's interesting is that true trust means that we are you only truly trust, you can only put all your trust in someone else when you're completely dependent on them and have no other hope than them. Which means we never really end up trusting anyone else completely. Nor can we ever trust ourselves completely. Which leads, by the way, to a certain amount of existential angst in every human being. And a certain amount of anxiety. Because there's no one we can completely rely on, and certainly not ourselves. So we're always insecure. We're never completely secure. However, we will learn God can be completely relied upon. In fact, only God can be completely relied upon. And this will help us deal with the existential angst and insecurity of which is part of the human condition. And even though it's late, let's read the 7th condition quickly so that tomorrow we'll continue the conversation in how it relates to God. So 49 in our books, page 49, number 7. Finally, the author says that the friend who is being trusted must be known as generous and kind, both towards the one who deserves it and the one who does not. For if this quality is not present in that friend, he might give up trusting in him, thinking that he is undeserving of his friend's kindness. So in other words, even though the first characteristic was the person has to love you, but you might say to yourself, well, the person loves me, but maybe I don't deserve it. And by the way, one of the great causes of human angst is the feeling that people feel that they're undeserving.
Wow.
So you have to, in order to truly trust, you have to know that even when you are unworthy, you will still be taken care of. That there's nothing you can do to ruin it. You have to know that there's nothing you can do to harm the trust you are putting into the one in whom you trust. The seventh factor, the one who is being trusted is extremely generous and kind, both towards those who are deserving of his kindness as well as to those who are not deserving. Additionally, his generosity must be constant and his kindness continuous, never ending or uninterrupted. Basically, by the time you finish this, you learn there's no one in whom you can actually trust completely at all. And having complete trust is almost impossible, which, by the way, is good to know. It's good to know.
It is good to know. True.
It's normal, by the way, to understand when you finish this, of course, you're going to feel insecure in this world. You are insecure in this world. You can't trust in yourself. You can't trust in people. You can't trust your money. You can't trust the doctors. You can't trust anything. Now, obviously, as we said before, you can trust to a certain degree. But to be completely secure, forget about it. Nobody can be completely secure. Someone who possesses all these qualities, in addition to that which was mentioned beforehand in the introduction and in chapter 1, meets all the criteria necessary to gain a person's trust, this then surely leads the person who knows this about him to trust in him and to have peace of mind as a result of his reliance on him, both when it comes to the trusting person's behavior in public and his behavior in private, in the trusted person's mind, never worrying about his needs as well as for the rest of his body and his actions. And he will give himself over to the trusted persons as well to accept his decrees and to judge him positively, believing that even those things that seem to be bad are actually good. In other words, if you find such a person who can fulfill all 7 of these characteristics, boy, are you safe. If you can find someone who can fulfill all these 7 characteristics, boy, are you safe and can you sleep at night? Now, the only question left, which we're going to have to address tomorrow, is, does God fulfill all these 7 characteristics? Does God really fulfill all these 7 characteristics? And I think maybe the last one is the hardest one to know. Can I ruin it? Can I become unworthy of God's help? Guys, so let's see. Ladies and gentlemen, come back tomorrow and we will analyze whether God fulfills all these 7 characteristics. Any last questions or comments before we call it a day? Can't hear if anyone's talking.
I have a comment. I don't know if you can hear me.
I hear you now.
It's those earbuds. They don't let me talk.
Okay, we can hear you now.
All right, I took them out. So I just have a comment. Like, I know, like, for myself, that when I'm in like dire straits, thankfully I haven't been for, well, not so far today, but if I, but the day is young. But if I, sorry, loud truck. If I should find myself in dire straits, that's who I call on. Like, let's say, God forbid, I'm driving and like some horrible, I'm going to be, some like, forced off the road into the ditch or something like that, which has happened to me. I call on God. I don't call on anybody else. But when everything's fine and dandy, oh, I'm sailing along, I'm trusted in me, my capabilities, But I know, like in the when the what hits the fan, that's where and I'm sure I'm not the only one. So just wanted to comment on that. The other thing is, like, we don't have servants and masters, so that's really hard for me to grasp that. I don't know what a maidservant feels towards a master, but I know, like, about other things, I'm 100%, like, I'm dependent on electricity,
And
things
we
like
know how unreliable that can be.
exactly.
Okay, very interesting point. Interesting. There's a lot to think about over here. Tomorrow, we will apply these 7 characteristics and see, does God fit these 7 characteristics? Because certainly nothing else does.
Right.
Although, as we've said before, it doesn't mean you can't, it doesn't mean, obviously there's some people that are more trustworthy and more capable, and in some circumstances, it's not to say we shouldn't trust them. Now, at the end of the day, though, it is healthy to know the limitations of the ones in whom we put trust. It's healthy to know, because if you put unrealistic expectations on people, it doesn't help our relationships.
Or yourself.
Or yourself. It's unhealthy to put unrealistic expectations in unrealistic places.
True.
But you can't live your life without friends either.
Absolutely, you have to have friends. Absolutely. And it actually enhances your friendships. It will enhance your friendships to have realistic expectations from you. It enhances, you can become a better friend knowing your own capacities. And which doesn't mean do nothing, because we are a lot more capable than we think we are. We are a lot more capable than we think we are. Well, we're also not all powerful, and neither are our friends. Ladies and gentlemen, let's call it a day right over here. There's a tremendous amount to think about and discuss over here. Let's think about it for 24 hours. We'll come back tomorrow morning and continue the discussion. Thank you very much. See you tomorrow.
Thank you.
You'll send the link to the recording, Rabbi?
Yes.
Thank you.